Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have the ISTP live Q&A. And so Brian, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a terrific pleasure to be here. I've been a fan for a very long time. My name is Brian. I'm an ISTP. I have a channel that's partially dedicated to MBTI called the Genxennial. I'm a 43-year-old married father of two. Um, I live in Michigan. I'm a stay-home dad, and yeah, you gotta drag some of that info out of this old ISTP, but I'll be willing to give it up.
No worries, audience, you heard it. So feel free to ask some questions on the sidebar to drag out some things from Brian. And so would you like to tell us about your dominant function, introverted thinking, TI, and how you experience it?
Sure, sure. I'd say TI, obviously, it's just always there. It's always in the background. It's always doing its thing. I'm, I kind of, I've thought a lot about TI, and I think it's, I've called it my curse in the past. I've called TI my curse. And it's just because of, the stereotypical reasons where I'm always questioning things. I'm always trying to uncover validity of, statements, validity of politics, validity in all of reality. Who is trying to uh, tell me that reality is wrong, and how can I catch them on it? And it's really almost like so natural that it's everything. Everything I'm hearing, if it's new, is scrutinized,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be a little bit after you realize what's happening with that. It's a little bit troubling to the soul. Like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't be so cynical. But that's really what it is. It's natural cynicism, and it's also it's a blessing as well. Uh, it's pretty hard to trick me, things like that. It's pretty fun sometimes to try and narrow down what's truth, what's not truth, what's quasi truth. These are all fun types of things that can be pieced and parsed with TI. But most of the time, when I feel it, like literally understand that it's working, is like uh, television commercials, radio commercials, politics, anything where I'm trying to be sold an idea or sold something. I'm immediately trying to figure out, okay, what's their angle? And that can be good and bad. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's my TI. That's how TI encompasses my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very critical and analytical, looking at your lines of logic to see if it's clean and it holds up. Cool. And so, Brian, how do you experience your auxiliary function, extroverted sensing, SE?
Well, that's definitely the fun function. SE, I will talk about NI next. I wager the two fun functions for sure. SE is, well, I guess I would say it's almost as if all of our functions may have good and bad, right? If I was to say where does SE get in my way, it would be planning. It would be thinking about the future. It would be understanding consequences. But where it benefits is, I really thoroughly enjoy pushing my body to the limit. Sports, weightlifting, all those things came more than naturally. It was almost like a desire to engage in those activities, and it didn't really matter if it was team or not. It was the burn and the hustle is actually fun. The pain that some people are discouraged by is actually inviting. so to speak.
That's beautiful. And some ISTPs might have a lower down version of extroverted sensing. So I have some friends who are ISTPs who just watch anime and play video games at home all day. So there's a quality of experiencing that SE has. Sometimes it's in passive ways and sometimes it's in active ways.
I'm really glad you brought that up. I have been, I've been playing video games for my whole life, essentially. And that really is the place where it doesn't seem like SE because you're not really engaging with your body, but you are. And I believe that it's my SE that gives me the capability to like fine tune my gaming skills. When it comes down to, I always had fun with like speed run type situations. I wasn't necessarily a speed runner, but I was like a Gran Turismo was one of my favorites for a long time. And there is a real thrill to repeating that task and finding the perfect solution.
Yeah. There's also a quality of SE that is seeing things as they are, seeing things as they actually are. And there's also a quality of it being in the moment too. And so sometimes with SP types, you'll see that sometimes they don't like to think too far into the future because it's like, let's deal with that when it comes around. Because how could you possibly know everything that's going to happen in the future until it becomes like concretized?
Yeah, and that's, my SE comes out in that way a lot too. I find myself often saying, well, what if we're pontificating about the future and all these different possibilities, I end up basically saying, well, why are we building these bridges that we don't know if we need to cross them yet or not? And that's kind of like my mantra that keeps me from going out like any would in that second slot. And I'm constantly focused on reality. You're right. And I use that word a lot too, especially when I'm talking about, just the reality of the world. It's almost as if I overuse the word because I'm so focused on it.
Cool. And so, Brian, how do you experience your tertiary function, introverted intuition, NI?
Yeah, that's my other fun function. The plus sides of NI are they allow me to philosophize. I really enjoy philosophy. I really enjoy cosmology, theology, just all of the what ifs that can be tied to reality. So that's how I explain my difference. The fact that I have NI instead of NE is I'm not reaching out to these possibilities that appear beyond reality. So there's like this harnessing between SE and NI that occurs to where all the possibilities that could be real, like simulation theory or aliens or things like that, are really exciting to me. But I don't go too far beyond what I believe is possible.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
And I guess where it hinders, a lot like TI, I feel like my NI tries to focus down on one thing, and then it believes it knows the truth about something, and often that can kind of get morphed into like conspiracy theory type thinking. So I need to be a little bit cautious about that kind of thing sometimes. I was always fascinated with that stuff as a kid. I had Mysteries of the Unknown when I was a kid. I got it for Christmas a bunch of years in a row, and it was the greatest series ever. And they were, what is Bigfoot and what are aliens and all these concepts that before I got into that series, I thought, oh, wow, this stuff is all potentially real. And I was like, well, where can I go to find out if this stuff is real? Well, here's the most official source I can find. And hey, Mom, I want these books. And, when get through the books, even as a 10-year-old kid, you kind of realize, oh, there's nothing here. So, but it doesn't mean it's not fun to go through that process.
Excellent. And how do you experience your repressed function, extroverted feeling, Fe?
That's what I focus on the most, consciously. I didn't understand that I was consciously focusing on Fe until MBTI, obviously, but it's been the primary conscious focus for my entire life, probably ever since my TI turned on. I grew up in a region of the country that is very conservative minded, and my TI was always asking questions about what they were, about the truths they were giving me, and as far as religion and that kind of thing. And what frustrated me was I wasn't even getting answers to the questions. It was just more like, you're not allowed to ask those questions. So that's when I realized, oh, I have this thing where I keep on ticking these people off with my questions. So I need to start focusing on how they feel about what I say. And ever since then, ever since I had that realization, there's always been a focus, a small focus, mind you. I'm still part of that stereotype, but there has been a conscious, legitimate focus on others and how I can not be such a jerk. We don't do it on purpose. We make these benign observations of the world. At least we think they're benign, but they can, even things that aren't necessarily politically incorrect, it can be anything. It can be anything that somebody takes offense to, and we really do feel that when we offend somebody. And I think that's where that Fe comes from.
Yeah, you look around you and it's a social crime scene. It's like you wanted to give someone a truth muffin and they're like, this is a bitter muffin, ew. And then they kind of slap it out of your hand. It's like, no, this is a gift, or it's just me talking. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's almost like if you let that, when it's a little bit unharnessed, I would run around like trying to help people or give them advice without them asking for it, I guess, if so to speak. I almost was like overcompensating at one point. And, that's when it can go the other direction, and then you become the know-it-all. And so fine tuning that took a few decades, just a few.
Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that, Brian. And so on to the Q&A. Which is your favorite time of the day and why?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I can't say as I've ever thought about that. But if I were to say, like, in my life experience right now, my favorite time of the day is probably the mid-morning. That's when I have my full burst of energy. I'm not really a morning person, so to speak. I really need about 15 to 20 minutes to myself to get out of the phase there. But once the ball starts rolling, I have most of my energy in the mid-morning to early afternoon time. That would be my favorite time of the day.
Cool. And so thank you, Joyce and Brian. Thank you for this live. Question for the both of you: does belonging to the beta quadra and having all 4 functions being the same make it easy to communicate?
I've always felt like I did get along with beta quadra. It's almost like there's and I don't know, it's weird for me to say it. It's almost like there's an unspoken understanding going on there. I don't know if that works for the other quadras, but whenever we're just in general conversation or, whatever's going on, there's a flow and an understanding that seems different. And I've I've always thought that, you know, that's kind of like my lane is the beta quadra lane. Everybody in there is just great.
I would agree. There's a natural chemistry I have with people in the beta quadra too. Like when I'm around them, it feels energizing for some reason. The vibe is just nice. And so check out the Genxennial. Oh yeah, this question too. I like the name, but what does it mean?
Yeah, I made it up, really. I was born in 1978, and the quote unquote bridge between Gen X and millennials is 78 to 82 ish, right? So I thought, I've always felt more like millennial minded, but I have kind of that gruffness of Gen X. So I've never really felt one or the other when I try and force myself to, it's kind of silly to try and. Anyway, I thought, I am kind of middle of the two. So why not be the Gen Xial? But then I thought, well, Genxennial sounds right.
You're the best of both worlds. What can you say?
Yeah, and there was a word floating around there for a bit, Xennial, Xennial, which was basically a descriptor of the same thing. And instead of, I'm always worried about being a ripoff artist. So many as a YouTuber, there's such a feeling of, well, I don't want to take this idea and be unoriginal and this and that. But I lost my spot. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I lost my spot.
Yeah. Well, it's a good channel name. You aced that. And so what did you think about typology before you got into it? What about now?
I was always skeptical. There's the old adage that it's astrology for nerds. But that was before I really thought too much about philosophy and psychology. And then when Winston's mom turned me onto it last year, and I actually, had time to look into it and read about the origins and understand the patterns and see that there's actually a reality here. I thought, wow, I've been trying to find a way to organize my thoughts and feelings my whole life. And here's like just this, it's like a map. Once you learn the cognitive functions, you're not any longer sitting around thinking, well, how does this feeling work? What am I feeling? And how do I fix this? Well, when you can ascribe some data points to it, and you can say, oh, well, when I say I need to work on my SI, I need to plan better. I need to, yada, yada, yada. And it's just it's a super awesome way to categorize what I'm feeling, interpret what's happening, and provide myself a solution.
Fascinating. The word skepticism, I hear, is correlated with a few functions just as a trend. Remember, functions are not correlations, but it's interesting to learn about them. I hear TI users often say that they're skeptical. And also high sensing function people also say that they're skeptical too. Because it's like, does this line up with reality? And then
talk about a double whammy.
Yeah, the TI is like, does this make sense? And so you have that skepticism there. Very cool. And I really do see type as a map. It's a very accurate map. It's probably described me better than anyone in my life has ever attempted to describe me. So it gained a lot of credibility that way.
Big time.
And so how do you understand or relate to TE?
TE and I have an interesting relationship, I suppose. TE to me is a little bit bulldozy. It's but at the same time, it's how you get things done. I recently, I've been editing a video from my live stream that I did last night. I try and occasionally cut those up into like little chunks. And I realized that I was saying it doesn't matter if it's right, as long as it works. And I thought I'm pretty sure I can turn that into some kind of comedy video about pointing a finger at me, yelling, he's TE, he's TE. So that's my relationship with TE is I submit to it when I have to, and it bulldozes me around sometimes, but I understand its importance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's also a quality of SE that can mimic qualities of TE too. So an ISTP who has developed their SE might be more likely to just do it and just put things out. But it doesn't come from a TE place. It's more like their SE. It's also an action-oriented function, so it's going to like look like TE when it's not really.
Well, I could say something about that. I very often find myself in my older years here when something needs to get done and I would normally procrastinate, I tell myself there's no better time than the present. I say that to myself all the time when I have to just get it done. There's no better time than the present.
Yeah, so the difference there is like SE will be action oriented, but it's because it doesn't want tasks to stack. So it's like, okay, I got to do these in the present because I don't want A, B, and C, D to stack. Whereas TE does it because it's structured and it's just naturally structured. And that's not like, so they have different motivations for getting at the same action oriented thing.
Yeah, so it could be that I do just flat out ignore TE. That could be it too. It's not on purpose, I promise.
Cool. And so how did you get into typology? You mentioned that a bit. And what aspects personally interest you about it and make you want to keep learning more?
I got serious about it a little over a year ago. Winston's mom showed up my channel one day and offered me a few nice compliments. They were compliments in the form of MBTI statements. So I thought, okay, well, first I got to figure out, what does all this mean? And I remembered it from taking the tests over the years, here and there. But yeah, I would just circle around to what aspect personally interests you about it. What really interested me about it right away was, I believe it was probably the OPS page. I really, really thoroughly enjoy their older videos and how they explain the cognitive functions with their little bubbles. I think Dave does a really good job with that. But that kind of ties into what makes me want to keep learning more. Shamefully, I may have reached my limit potentially, because I've gotten to the point where I've found everything that I can find that helps me. MBTI has certainly had a positive impact, and it was well worth learning the cognitive functions. But when I suppose the next step would be either stay MBTI and maybe get certified, or start branching out and looking at the other philosophies. And since it's too hard to just generally prove any of it altogether, I feel like it might be a waste of time to start learning the other philosophies when I kind of got out of it what I wanted in the first place, and I still get out of it what I wanted. So there was a long, many months there where the desire to learn every single day was there. I'm a consumer at heart. But I did reach that point to where it was kind of like, okay, I see what's going on here and it's working for me. And taking the next step just seems too broad, so to speak, unless it would be just sticking right with strict MBTI stuff.
Yeah. For me, it never gets boring. I think I'll be into typology even when I'm like 100 years old. Pray that I live that long. Or maybe I don't. Who cares? But it's fascinating because I feel like there are so many ways to be one type. And so I feel like it's an endless learning hole.
Yeah, and I could piggyback off that a little bit. I don't think I'll ever be bored of it. In fact, that's kind of why I morphed my YouTube channel a little bit. I do a few different things on my channel, but I do believe that even though I'm not certified or anything like that, my understanding of how I work as an ISTP in this world, and being here for 43 years and having what I think to be is a fruitful experience. I really want to be able to pass that along to other ISTPs, because I remember how confused I was as a younger man, and if I would have been able to get a hold of some of this information then and be convinced by it, obviously the information was there, but there wasn't anybody saying, "Hey, I'm just like you." So that's why I won't get bored of it. I don't think my FE wants to get that out there.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to younger ISTPs? Let's say I'm a younger ISTP coming to you and I found out this. What would you want to tell me?
That it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not always be right. And people will come around if you just try not to be a know-it-all and try not to tell people what to do. Don't let that TI run amok, because especially these days with like the internet, can fall into an echo chamber with a bunch of other broken TI people, and it's just you'll never get out.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's ego crushing to turn your back on what you thought your beliefs were. Anytime an ISTP has to pull their flag out of a hill that they were prepared to die on, but it's possible. It is possible, as long as you keep an open mind, listen to people a little bit more, understand that feelings are real. A lot of the times, I think the ISTP is a little too stoic, maybe, but maybe it's not like stoicism in the official sense, but more like pull yourself up by your bootstraps type attitude, and that's not really very empathetic. So just try and be aware when it's time to display a little bit of empathy.
Yeah. How have you learned empathy over the years? Or what is your version of it?
It happened to me when now I don't have this completely pinned down because it's unprovable, like a lot of these things that I'm involved in that are fun. But the illusion of free will is really what made me come around on empathy. Once I came to the understanding that there's a billion choices that we don't have compared to the few that we have, and all those billions of influence and choices that we didn't have that influence us in different ways. There's so much pain and hurt out there in the world, and it's not their fault. And so it's really much easier to empathize with somebody when you have the belief that we're just along for the ride, and sometimes you get a short straw, but it's not your fault. So it's a little easier. Like I delve into politics and whatnot. It's easier for me to now have compassion for those who I don't agree with, because I can have a more of an understanding of where they're coming from through that context. So and I try not to be super empathetic. I try to be compassionate. There's a hair to split there between empathy and compassion. And if you go too far down the empathy side, you can kind of end up hurting yourself a little bit. So I wouldn't recommend that either. Try and find that nice little lane between empathy and compassion so that you're not getting so involved that you're starting to get hurt.
That's really good advice. In my coaching with ISTPs or with TI or FI dominant types, something I notice as a trend is that they're very idiosyncratic. So when you have an introverted judging function as your dominant function, it's very niche, or it's very like your own type of perception or own type of judgment in which other people may not understand. And so your beliefs or your values or your interests and hobbies might be very different than the group or the tribe around you. So oftentimes it can lead to this accidental lone wolfness that ISTPs go through. By accident, they like people, but as a byproduct, as an accident, they sometimes end up isolating themselves just because maybe they have interests or hobbies that are different from the group, or their beliefs are different from the group, or their values are different. And so there's that. And
well, I would relate that to like video games. For the first half of my life, there wasn't online video games, and I was a loner playing video games. And then when online came, it was like this. It was the most amazing thing that you could now engage while being a loner. It's kind of interesting.
very, very cool. And so what is your relationship with extroverted intuition?
I don't think there is much of one. I enjoy it a lot. I enjoy seeing, oh gosh, it's so hard to explain that function. It's almost like it's fake. Like I enjoy being creative, but I'm not really creating things. Like all of my background ideas and all of my artistic ideas that I've done in my tool videos, and these aren't really my ideas. I take an idea from over here and I take an idea, and my creativeness is a collage of ideas. And that's why I often run into if I try and take too big of a piece for the collage, then I feel like I'm like ripping it off. So being creative is hard. Trying to entertain philosophies that are a little bit too far out for me, like astrology and whatnot, it's really difficult. It's almost like annoyingly difficult to try and entertain those things.
Yeah, really well said.
Thanks.
And so Winston's mom, the person who got you into typology, says, do you always bring home items from the grocery store, like steel kitchen colanders, and turn them into nifty inventions like your Wi-Fi router hack? Lol.
I suppose maybe I do. She's referencing a I don't know if you've ever had if anybody who's ever had a weak Wi-Fi router, you're always like trying to find ways to get a stronger signal. And if you go on the internet, you start running into videos about how to set up a tinfoil array, and all these crazy concepts. And I thought, well, there's got to be like a cleaner, nicer way of getting that, because they do work. I mean, the concept is it's sound concept. But I was just walking through the grocery store one day and I saw this collapsible steel colander. I'm all hooked up and everything right now, or else I'd go get it. But it basically looks like a steel satellite dish. And I zip tied it to this little stick, and I set it in front of the Wi-Fi, and bam, 8% more speed. So it's those little like life hacks, I guess, that we kind of just naturally happen upon.
That's awesome. I need you for life hacks. So what do you think about the ISTP stereotypes? What do you personally not relate to?
I actually, the weird thing about stereotypes is most of the time they're stereotypes for a reason. I relate. I relate to all of them, really. I have a short that actually talks about this. I don't like fixing cars at all. It's get on a dirty floor, get dirt in your eyes, but it comes easy. I just on a whim, I built a dog run in our backyard the other year. Just went out, got the stuff, and just did it, and it came easy, but it wasn't like enjoyable. I didn't enjoy the time doing it. I didn't not enjoy it either. I'm just saying that the stereotypes for the ISTP are pretty real for me. All of them are there.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if ISTPs have a hard time knowing what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy sometimes. It's like, do you always know what you like or dislike? I don't know. Do you have a strong sense of your feelings? Are they delayed? Are they not?
That is a really good question, because I wish I could. I have an example on the tip of my tongue, but there are times when the cynical TI says no to something, but then if I give it a minute, then it's like I'm pleasantly surprised, and I say yes. So I guess having the patience to give things a chance should be you need to do that, because you'll often pleasantly surprise yourself at what you can actually find enjoyable or find correct or anything like that.
That's great. Yeah. Put yourself more in the extroverted sensing, SE. Just experience things and see if you enjoy it instead of prejudging them.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And so, what stereotypes do a disservice to ISTPs?
A disservice. Well, it's weird because having a disservice would mean I would have to feel it's a disservice. And you're asking me to use introverted feeling to do that, I think, which is not much of. So I guess if somebody was just like, oh, you're an ISTP, I'm not going to like you, then I would be like, okay, that your ISTP is doing me a disservice at that point because I haven't even had the chance, right? I guess it would be that. It was that it's kind of fun to have the tough a-hole moniker, but sometimes it's not so fun either, because a lot of us really aren't that way, and it's assumed we are.
Yeah. Gosh darn it. Yeah. And they're not all mechanics too. Some of them are, but not all of them. So don't like generalize that onto everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can do it, we just might not like it.
Yeah, and there's also a really interesting way in which you approach the stuff that you make. It's a difference between TI and FI. It's the difference between crafty and artistic. And so, like, when an ISTP makes something, they're not really expressing a part of themselves like FI would.
That's true.
Yeah, could you go into that a bit?
Wow, that is really insightful. I never thought about that, and it's true. Yeah, I get a lot more satisfaction out of not so I get satisfaction out of the completed project, but it's not the way you said it. It is Can you regurgitate that for me? And
Yeah, when I talk to FI users, they say they love creating things because it's expressing a part of them, even if it's an inadequate expression of all of them, because nothing will ever encapsulate their whole being. Like, TI doesn't go in with the goal of expressing itself at like a part of, like a personal part of themselves, like FI typically talks about doing.
yeah, like the first thing that comes to mind when I think about my artistic expression are my tool videos. There's two of them specifically, the Rosetta Stone video and the Schism video. Both of those I are both of those I threw my art, my self art into it, but I wasn't like personalizing it. Like in one of them, I'm doing a little bit of acting type stuff, but it was more in the spirit of the song rather than me trying to express myself. And the same goes for the Schism video, which is basically a compilation of Alex and Allison Gray's artwork. That's not my work, but I took all their art and I arranged them in like this videographic type puzzle piece scenario going over the song. So, and I did that because I loved their work and I loved the song. But there's not really much of me in there at all, if any, other than the work that went into making that happen. That's really all I have into it personally.
Yeah. With FI, there's typically more of an intimate, personal self-expression. With TI, it's more of the technicalities are all in the right place, and there's a detachment to it almost.
Yeah, I almost feel like all of my tool stuff is more like an homage to tool rather than my expressions of what and at the end of each video, I give my personal interpretation of the song. But at the same time, that doesn't make it my stuff. Or my, yeah.
Really cool, really cool. Yeah. And this applies most to the TI DOM and the FI DOM. When it starts to go down the stack, it becomes more complicated. And so what type interactions tend to make your cynical scrutiny radar go off, especially?
What type interactions tend to make my radar go off?
Astrology is one of them, as we've talked about.
Yeah. Oh, like far and away, more than anything in the world is advertisements. Television commercials and radio commercials. Ever since I can remember, I've been so annoyed by the lies that I find and the deception. Basically, anything that has to do with trying to deceive somebody with underhanded language, verbiage, trying to trick people with words is obscene to me. And I assume most other TI DOMs, because we can see right through it. It's a glass wall. We can see your BS a mile away.
Yeah. TI kind of sees itself as the ultimate authority of the truth. So it has like this true or false a filter. It's like, this seems like fishy. It doesn't make sense. And it gets stuck in the filter until you can make sense of it.
I could add on that maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
I almost feel like TI unbridled can get in a lot of trouble doing that. I think I use my NI to basically validate or referee the TI. It feels that way. It feels that way when it's happening because TI can often go down dark roads that seem logically true, but they're like extremely dark roads. And then NI and FE have to say, hey, whoa. No, you can't do that. That's not, it seems right, but look at the world. You can't do that, TI. Stop.
You're like,
naughty TI.
You have to rein it in. Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
And so what has helped you identify as a Jungian thinking dominant type?
Help me identify as Jungian thinking that. I guess, would it be what or who, maybe? Or
Precise.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, very precise. I guess general traits of what helps you narrow down on why you're a TI Dom.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. watching Benjamin has helped me a lot. I guess it was just it was a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of trial and error. MBTI test always pegged me as an INTP or an INTJ in my younger years.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started this process, I kept getting INFJ.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of had me thinking, well, is it any of these? And so I basically had to go out of what are these 16 different things and just start learning the functions. And once I started reading about TI, and then you go down the rabbit hole of all the people who talk about TI, and you basically do that with every function. And TI just far and away stood out as what I do and what I've been doing forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you mix that in with the complications that come with the TI FE axis, and it's like a double whammy. It's it's like a confirmation that but then you have to, I mean, it's not so simple, right? Then you have to start wondering, you also have to determine, are you FE or are you FI? And then that will also help you determine, are you TI or are you TE? And it's actually, I believe it's a far more complicated process than I would be able to explain in a digestible way, just in a matter of a few minutes. But I think anybody who has at least dipped their toe in that type of process can kind of see how far down the rabbit hole goes. And believe me, I dove all the way down it until I hit the bottom, and here we are, all YouTube and MBTI all the time, telling my friends about it, and they're like, "What? Wait a minute! You should see how surprised." Because I was always, Mr. Realist, and then here comes Brian with this, kooky personality stuff. Brian, you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Believe me. Wait till you hear what I have to say.
Yay. We'll bring you on the dark side. And yeah, well, we already have. And one of the qualities of TI dominant types, or with ISTPs that I interview, is that like they'll talk and then they'll pause for accuracy because they want to like the next words they say, they want to like kind of like pivot it towards the correct, accurate way of saying it. And so you'll notice that with how Brian's talking. And it's almost like sometimes with some TI users, bringing their voice down to a monotone helps them actually focus on saying the thought in the most accurate way possible, too. I noticed as well. I noticed with...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, continue.
If there's any editors or creators out there who understand video editing, there's so much work to cutting out those pauses. There's so many pauses, you wouldn't believe it. And I spent an hour today it's just so many pauses. And I understand, guys. It took me a while to figure out, but I understand that they got to come out, because hearing myself do what I do with all the pausing and the looking up, and it gets old real fast. So I have to cut out all those pauses, 100 pauses of video. It's insane.
So interesting. Yeah, and you mentioned how you scored INTP and INTJ and even considered INFJ at some point too. So you'll see with the MBTI or 16 type community that there's an intuitive bias. So a lot of people, when they start off their journey, they tend to think they're an introvert type and also an intuitive type too. So it's a very common place for ISTPs to start. In case you have a friend who's taken a test and they scored that, but they seem like an ISTP, it might be a good place to start. If an ISTP finds itself in front of a complex idea, what would usually be the process to understand it? How would you gather information with your SE, and what role does NI play here?
Complex idea. So I guess the first thing that comes to mind is maybe I need to learn a new machine at work. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for the instruction manual, and I'm going to read it. In fact, there's a weird stereotype. I don't know if it's everywhere in the world, but in America, there's a stereotype that guys don't read the instruction manual. It's not manly to read the instruction manual. That's the dumbest crap ever. Read the instruction manual. That's how to understand a complex idea. And you get understanding from things by be given the information of how they work. And that's what the instruction manual does. So hopefully my complex idea that I'm being challenged with has an instruction manual.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. You'll see this theme with introverted types is that they tend to kind of want to reflect and take in information before acting. So, Brian talks about wanting to pause, absorb information before like tackling something. Of course, like if you're a little more SE heavy, you're going to just kind of jump in and get your hands dirty too. So there's also ISTPs that do that too. But especially like ISTPs in an Enneagram 5 sense, they're going to be even extra investigatory, and they're going to have that side that wants to do some thorough looking up something before jumping into something. But yeah.
I am a 5. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. And so I'm wondering, do you find yourself TIing, like what subject matters do you like to TI with? Is it with like physical objects? Do you like to think about, and tinker with reality things? Or do you like to tinker with concepts and understand it with your TI? Where do you apply it? Where do you apply your mental facilities?
Well, I guess outwardly it would be towards scrutinizing the world, like philosophy and politics. And inwardly, I would say that like through MBTI, right? MBTI is a great way to TI your own feelings. I'm hung up. I'm hung up.
No worries, no worries. That's also NE polar too. Just running out of ideas on how to take something. Like even if NE forgets where it's going to take its train of thought, NE still has the capability of redirecting it towards a thought it wasn't planning on going down, but now it's going to go down.
That sounds like BSing to me.
Yeah, so with ISTPs, you'll see more of wanting to see things as they actually are with their SE. So they're not going to jump into any mode and BS things when they really just want to. So here's the difference between an ISTP and an INTP. You present them with something, let's say these two objects. This is the Dario Nardi pen test. Dario Nardi asks, which is the bride and which is the groom and why? I once profiled an ISTP and they're like, I don't have enough information. That's what they said. And I was like, that's so SE NI of you. It's like, we don't have enough SE to infer any NI underlying patterns. So I'm going to leave it at that. Whereas like typically when I give the pen test, or what Dario Nardi says like that NE is supposed to do is generate almost and ideate possibilities for the stories behind these pens, being able to to interconnect ideas, even if like it's not reflecting in reality at that moment too.
I'll say it, hopefully without being too offensive, but that kind of thing is like silly, right? Like if the concept of us asking that, being asked that is kind of like I'm understanding what your friend was saying is, how can I do this? This is kind of a silly exercise. And that's FE fourth running right over you, Joyce. I'm sorry for that one.
It's all right. I'm used to it. And so I notice NI users take NE idea vomit very seriously. That is true. Like even as an NI user myself, I take NE. Like I've had an ENFP best friend and she would vomit out an idea. And then days or weeks or months after, I'd go back to her and go like, I thought about your idea. And here. And she's like, I already forgot about the idea. I moved on from that idea. I can't believe you just simmered with it. And I'm like, because I thought it was important to you. That's why you said it out loud. And it's so frustrating. Oh, gosh.
That sounds exactly right.
What Enneagram and Socionics types do you identify as?
I'm pretty sure I'm a 593. 90% sure on that one. I could potentially be a 583. But I'm mostly there on 593. And Socionics, I just don't have enough knowledge to say. I believe they call me an SLI. I've taken like basically one test of everything. And when I did the Socionics test, I was an SLI. And my first Enneagram test was a 5. And then I retook more of an official one once. And it had me as 593 or 583. So, yeah, basically any test was out there, I've taken it at least once.
Yeah. Well, I'm almost certified in the Enneagram. I just have a few more things I have to do. So, Brian.
Congratulations.
Yay! So if you
That's
ever
great
want to
news.
figure out your Enneagram for sure and your tri-type, I will be your gal.
You got it for sure.
ISTPs seem like more stoic versions of INTPs. Now, it's pretty interesting here. So this is a trend I've seen. This is not a rule, so some people fall out of it because they're outliers for sure. But I find like the truly stoic and robotic types are actually like more often the ISTPs than the INTPs. Like the NI-SE axis creates an even more linearness when they talk. So you know this like with Brian, he talks very linearly. And it causes an additional stoicness on top of the already stoicness of being a thinking dominant type. So I find that a lot of the stereotypes of being robotic that go to the INTP, sure, they could fall for that type, but they're actually more accurately applied to some ISTPs. Not all of them. You'll see some expressive ISTPs too. Don't mean the stereotype, but on a whole, that's true.
I feel like that kind of comes with age too.
Yeah.
And part of that understanding FE thing that we naturally do over life is, if I'm robotic now, I was far worse. When I say I'm consciously always thinking about my FE, it's, in situations like this, I'm continually putting energy out to try and, be more emotive and all the things.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Poweroid Bull says ISTP and ISFP are less talkative than the INTP and INFP. INTP and INFP, however, are less active than the other two. Cool. That's a good differentiation too. On a whole, not always, but it makes sense. And also, Joyce looks like Mona Lisa. That's because the lights in my house broke down, so I pulled an ISTP and I created my own lighting today.
Nice.
Yeah. That's the only life hack I can do. So, do you find yourself focusing on the future, whether that's your future or the potential future of the world, or are you primarily more present focused?
Well, in my personal life, I am presently focused. But when I ideate about humanity and that kind of thing, I do look off into the future. So, I believe in like a long-term plan. Um, the universe is going to experience the cold death eventually, and no matter where we run, no matter where we hide, there's no getting out of it. And so why are we fussing about with our tiny little qualms on this tiny little rock when we have, a sun that's going to go red giant in a billion years or so, and the inevitable entropy of the universe. And I just feel like once I put those things into perspective, a lot of what we have going on here just seems so petty. And that's where I think about the future, is the future of humanity. But I don't think about my own personal future at all. In fact, that's probably why uh, I have all the knowledge and all the understanding in the world of how terrible cigarettes are. But I repeatedly put off uh, not quitting because I just refuse to see the consequences of the future, even though I can sit here right now and tell you exactly what they are.
Cool. Yeah. So the higher up introverted intuition is up your stack, the longer term patterns you're going to see. So with SE dominant types like the ESTP and the ESFP, they'll have really good short-term pattern recognition. So like when an ESFP or ESTP is on the ball court, they know that short-term pattern of if a ball launches here, you're going to have to move your hand here because then it's going to go the other way. Whereas the more higher up NI comes up, the more long term the projection kind of takes off. Cool. And so if you could excel in one function outside your main stack, what would it be?
That's a good question. It's SI for sure. That's the function on the lower stack that I that I focus on the most. It's it's really interesting that the sixth slot is called the critical parent, because SI it's like a critical parent. When I make the same mistake twice, ooh, that's bad. When I forget to set my schedules, when I forget my responsibilities, that's bad. It didn't used to be, but as it develops more and more, you start to realize how naughty you are when when you don't do what you're supposed to do, and 6i critical parent cracks the whip.
Yeah. What is your relationship with SI?
It's kind of like if SI would have never come around, I'd probably be lost as hell. It's almost, I feel like it's my responsibility function. It's it took a while. It took a while to calm down and learn a little bit of responsibility, thinking about the future, those kinds of things, planning. That took a long time. Like I was saying earlier, my mom would always tell me, "You'll understand when you're older," and I never believed her. But now I fully understand what that means, and that kind of thing doesn't really happen until my SI kind of caught up.
Makes sense. That leads well into this question. Do you find yourself using your lower four functions? How do you experience it if you do?
I don't really much at all. Like, no, not really. Again, what I just spoke about SI, that kind of helps me keep myself productive, so to speak, as far as, you know, the chores of life and all those things. But as far as, you know, TE, I suppose TE I use to balance TI a little bit. I guess what we were saying earlier, maybe I was misthinking it when I was saying, you know, just get it done right now, because I used to procrastinate so much, and I thought maybe that was TE, but maybe it could be just better developed SE. Any, I suppose I use as much as SI in the way that I enjoy, like the creativity aspect of YouTube, the the effects and functionalities of the Adobe Premiere Pro Studio. Basically, when it comes to things like that, I just need to know it's possible. If I know that it's possible and I have the tools, I guarantee I can make it happen. And that's a fun process. FI, I don't really care. I'm sorry. I mean, it's like, I don't really care until it comes to something like, I don't know, even my family, that's still FE, I think. There are very few things that I'm super passionate about from that sense.
Wow, makes sense. Your FI is your last function, so that makes sense. Which cognitive function would you like to understand better? What would you like to experience a stimulation of for a day or so?
NE, probably. For, you know, kind of like some of the reasons we were talking about here. It's always, I wouldn't say it's a struggle to always find my thoughts and get them out right, but I feel like I'd be just like completely off the chains if I had any for a minute. Just to be able to go off the chains and not care, you know, not care if I'm just spewing a bunch of baloney, or not like it's all baloney, don't get me wrong. But I don't have that in me to just let it go like NE does. And I think that would kind of be freeing in a way.
Yeah, that is freeing for sure. Would you want to be an NE dominant or an NE auxiliary?
You know, let's just go full blown the other way. NE dom. We're going NE dom.
We're gonna have a new segment on your channel. An ISTP goes full blown extroverted intuition, and then you have like an ENFP on a speaker in your ear telling you to do things throughout the day. I don't know, or thoughts in your brain.
Please don't trademark that idea. I am stealing it. I love doing comedy stuff on my YouTube channel. That's the most fun of the videos that I have. Is the most recent one I did is kind of a satire thing, but one thing about being an ISTP YouTuber is, you know, people expect so much energy from YouTubers, and it's not only is it difficult to do that, but it almost feels like embarrassing in a way to go that extra mile. But I let it go in this last one. I made it totally satirical, and I was all, you know, hyped up and everything, and I actually had a lot of fun doing
it. Yeah, heck yes. And so have you developed your extroverted sensing?
I think that just came pretty naturally. I never really actually felt like I had to develop it, really. I guess where I do fine tune it maybe would be with video games. But also it's little things like cutting the lawn. Like when I mow the lawn, my lines are straight. They're straight as an arrow, and I make sure they're straight as an arrow. Because that's what feels good. It feels like I'm winning a video game when I'm making perfectly straight lines in the lawn. You know, I don't give a shit what the neighbors think. It's kind of nice to have a nice looking lawn. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to lie. But the vast greatest point mowing straight lines in the lawn is it's a challenge. How straight can I make these lines? And it's fun to challenge yourself in those ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With TISE or SETI, you'll see this satisfaction from getting the technicalities just right. And so, how much of a private person are you? And do you think people should be more private or more open with each other? Tell me all your secrets right now.
Yeah. I have thought about this actually, and I really think it might be the only way to, I mean, not the only way. I feel like I don't think anonymity on the internet is a good thing. I would say that. If I had my way, every person logging onto the internet, no matter where they go and who they are, there's a specific identifier that says who you are. So I don't believe in privacy in that way. And I'm not like too private. I think ISTPs aren't quite as private as people think. We just don't talk as much about it. So it might come off that way. To be honest, I really don't care too much. Unless it comes down to a point where it was like the state, right? If we had a governmental system that was, we didn't have our, I should know this. I want to say it's the Fourth Amendment, right? Or the Fifth, one of the two. If we didn't have that, then I might be more of a privacy-oriented ISTP. But I have faith in our system, and therefore I don't have too many qualms about
it. Cool. Do you feel comfortable when people bare their soul emotionally to you? So if I were to like one day just come to you and I would cry on your shoulder and then I don't know, be a mess in a dress, how would you feel about that? Like, what do you like it? Like, what subjects do you like people to be open in? Is it with their feelings, with their knowledge, with
everything, really? It's all contextual, to be honest with you. It's all in context. If the person is just crying, then they're hurt. And that's, hey, we all got to be there for each other. But if you're crying over spilled milk, it's another story.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, you're like, depending on the SE variable, my TI answer will be different. Got it. Personal thoughts on Jung's individuation process. Are you in pursuit of it personally?
Shamefully, I haven't studied too much Jung directly. I've read a little bit of stuff on introverted thinking, a few quips here and there, but once I ended up in his thoughts about like synchronicity and that kind of business, he lost me. And it was just kind of like, well, dude, I really like your cognitive function ideas, but all that other business is a little too woo-woo for me. So I have a full appreciation for the concepts of like self-actualization and mindfulness. I believe mindfulness it's almost like the 21st century should be the century of mindfulness. We need to take those next steps to that's a little too abstract, but yeah, I'm grateful that he gave us these tools, but there's places he goes that I just can't.
It's pretty interesting. You're a thinking dominant type, and your first answer to a lot of questions is criticism. You're like, all right, well, Jung's idea here isn't sound in this area, and he's not being realistic. but he's an all right dude. Your FE like tries to save the day a little bit too. You're like, my FE nice guy is gonna come in and say, you know, I like his function theory, but his other stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like we do the backwards of no offense, but we offend and then say no, but I didn't mean it that way, or the way you may have taken it, or yeah, I get it.
What is the most out of character thing you did?
Oh wow. The most out of character thing I did. I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, and not like, it's a great question, but what I do is me. I'm trying to think of maybe joining MBTI. The concept of it, like I said, when I tell my friends about this, they're like, "Are you okay? You know, this doesn't sound like something you would be into." Oh, that's my answer. Firmly planting a flag and saying, I am with this group of people who believe in this thing that technically can't be proven. I've never done anything like that before, and I'm happy I did.
Yay! Now we get to chat because you took that leap. What an amazing line of fate. And so, like an ISTP without SI in the top 4 MBTI functions, are you ever nostalgic about the past, especially for your childhood and teenage?
I don't think my nostalgia for the past has anything to do with my functions, because I had a back surgery in the year 2000, and it basically stopped everything that I love doing. I was a wrestler, uh, very intensive weightlifter, basically all the physical things, and then I blew out L3, L4, and I had to remove it. And back then, disc replacement technology wasn't a thing. I think it was in the trial phases, maybe, and they wanted like $1 million to be a part of the trial. I was like, I called around. I was like, "Hey, who can, save my back, so I can wrestle again?" And they were wanting like insane amounts of money. And even today, it's still an elective surgery. If I could get one, I could get back out to doing all those things, but I'm mostly nostalgic about the things that I can't do anymore. Um, so I
Yeah.
don't think it's necessarily type related.
Nostalgia isn't just as an SI thing. If there's something that you're not able to do anymore that you used to be able to do, you're going to feel a pang of hurt there or grief there. Grief can feel like nostalgia. So it's almost like you grieve not being able to SE like you used to SE.
Yeah,
which makes
sure.
sense. And so can ICPs be in denial with their own feelings? Every article said that they're pretty blunt when they are in love. Or they're blunt in general.
Yeah, am I in denial of my own feelings? Well, I guess it would be kind of hard to say because I would be in denial of the feeling. I guess if I was going to say something about that, it's almost like we have an avoidance type thing going on. I don't, and I say we, I shouldn't say we. I say I have a type of avoidance that goes on that I feel like it could be FE related. And then there's a denial that comes with when people are upset, when you haven't seen them in a long time or something. I guess maybe that's the best way I can explain it. And are we pretty blunt when we are in love? I suppose I've always been truthful, is what I would say. I'm not sure how blunt I am, but you're always going to get the truth, and it may be blunt.
Yeah. truth can sting like salt to a wound. Or it's almost like, your wound is bleeding and you have to put antiseptic or something to clean it out. And at first it hurts, but ultimately it's good for you, is like TI. What it's saying is true, but whether or not you can stomach it is another thing sometimes. But ultimately it's for your better good. Did you grow up with many insecurities? If so, how were you able to relate them to your MBTI type as an adult?
Yeah, I guess the insecurities that I have related to MBTI type would be like the TIFE axis, where growing up, TI was just always wanting to piece and parse and ask questions about, especially like this is a very religious area of the country, and so I'm always just trying to get to the bottom of it. And they always telling me that I was wrong to ask the questions or whatever. I think that did make me insecure. It made me feel a little bit like, wow, I'm an idiot. Everybody is telling me that I'm wrong. I must be an idiot. You learn that that's not really the case, but that was an insecurity, I suppose, at one point in time. But that might be, I guess that's more of a combination of nurture around me combining with my nature, and it was kind of like maybe a double whammy, so to speak.
Yeah. Sometimes TI wants to get to the bottom of the truth, and it's socially unacceptable, and that can maybe bring shame. And so, what triggers you the most about the typology community?
People who demand that they're correct, whether they're creators or commenters. Anybody who runs around saying, I'm the only one who's right, or you're definitely wrong. None of these, sure, there is a right and wrong way to talk about the cognitive functions. You can just be a complete fool and just vomit stupid stuff, right? But there's also a try. Yeah, that would definitely be what triggers me the most, is when somebody says that they are the definitive authority, and yeah. That, like, somebody who comes to my comments and says, you're not an ISTP, you're a blah blah blah, that isn't really like triggering to my feelings, but it's triggering in the way, like, how do you have the audacity to just run around doing that? It's like a triggering of, it's probably some ISTP who hasn't developed this FE yet, to be honest with you.
Burn. Yeah. Yeah, when people think they're the final authority to type, it's cringy because they're going to be wrong in some areas at least. And so they're being kind of prideful or arrogant. There's type arrogance in the community, and that can be annoying when you actually know better than they do, but they think that they know better. So it's this
Yeah. Yep, that's the one.
Can you go into more detail about why you find value in online gaming as a social activity? Is it important to you to maintain physical distance between yourself and others?
Nope, it's not really ever important to maintain physical distance with anybody, except like people I don't know. Like if I'm in a line at the amusement park, there's just a certain amount of space that you're in the line at the bank or at the groceries. There's just we all have our bubble, right? I kind of think that we all kind of feel that way, stay out of my bubble type stuff, especially now in the days of the, what's going on. And I kind of did this one backwards, I think. what do I find valuable in online gaming is there's a lot of FE that goes on there. And I suppose the value that I found was finding like-minded people first. I wouldn't say it's online gaming in general, because that can be a pretty toxic experience if we're just winging out the generalities of online gaming. Where it really benefited me and I really thoroughly enjoyed it is when I found a group of like-minded people who were super friendly gamers and not cheaters and not toxic, and we just lifted each other up. And it wasn't always about winning, because believe me, the competitiveness that we have is unmatched. But you kind of come to a point where you realize having fun with friends is actually more fun than winning. And that helped me FE a lot more and let go of some of the competitiveness that was, kind of stressful, really. Being competitive is kind of stressful. So yeah, that's probably where, and again, I like, growing up, I guess free thinking, so to speak, it was really, really difficult to find somebody to talk to for a lot of years. It wasn't until the internet when I was able to finally realize, oh my goodness, there's free thinking people for me to actually engage with now. Like literally no one in my life for into my teenage years. I could not bounce my ideas off anyone. And when I finally was able to do that, it was just like a dam broke.
That's beautiful and mature of you to see that. And so what are some personal difficulties before in communicating with people who don't value your TI DOM ways? How is it now that you're aware of your function stack?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Empathy, I guess. TI DOM ways are, it's like trying to put myself in a place that says that the TI DOM way isn't the way. It's kind of like, well, do you see reality or not? But that's a really hard question. That's a really hard question. People, I guess, I don't know if I've had enough poor interactions with people while at the same time harnessing knowledge about MBTI and how my TI works. It would take me a little bit to try and revisit a scenario where that happened. Maybe I like the question. In fact, I'll think about that a little bit more, and maybe I can drop some in the comments later. I like that question though.
Cool. And so would you rather lose 25 IQ points or lose the function of your dominant hand?
20. Wow. Oh, wow. Oh, boy. If I lost 25 IQ points, that would put me in like a category that would be difficult to admit to. Oh my gosh. I'll take away my IQ.
That was the hard one. Yeah.
I mean, because I'm really, one thing that I would riff off of the other question about MBTI community and stuff is I feel like there's a stereotype about TI DOMs that it's really hard to live up to, and that's that we're all like geniuses or something. I'm not smart. I mean, I'm an average guy. I've never taken an IQ test, but if I were, I would guess it'd be right around the average, like 100. So if you take 25 points off of, that's a quarter. That's a lot. That puts me down into a range of like, can I even complete full sentences? But I really like to use my hands to do shit with. So I guess that's a great question. It's a
Yeah,
great question. Hard question.
you just want to put Brian to mental torment. And so would you rather have a superpower that is physical in nature or mental in nature?
So I guess I got to think about all the possibilities first. The mental in nature would be like be able to read people's minds or to be able to like telekinesis objects, maybe. Physical, fly, strength, speed. Teleporting would be pretty sweet. Would be pretty sweet.
You would never be late. You could just teleport.
I don't, I'd go off track a little bit by saying I don't think it's going to be very long before we'll be able to read minds. Check into the singularity. It's happening right now. It won't be long. Keep your secrets. Enjoy keeping your secrets because they're going away eventually. So I'll stay with realism and I'll say reading minds because I think it might actually be possible one day.
That's creepy. As an ISTP, have you tried snapping someone's neck with little to no effort?
I've snapped a few bones in my wrestling days. Yeah, a couple noses, an arm. It's no biggie. Just another day at the office.
Yeah, maybe you can snap my neck into place, into alignment.
Chiropractics is pseudoscience, Joyce.
Aww. How has Fe gotten you into trouble in your life?
Oh, how I count the ways. The weird thing is it's really TI that gets me in trouble. But I guess Fe would be when I take too long to reply to somebody, or when I'm terrible at birthdays. In fact, I've got to the point where I don't wish people happy birthday on Facebook anymore because I know that I'm going to forget 500 people, and then they might see that I wished Steve over here happy birthday, and then they'll be like, well, why didn't Brian wish me happy birthday? So before you get into that mess, just don't wish anybody happy birthday. And you don't have to deal with it. So, but that probably gets me in trouble. So it's something along those lines.
Yeah. I had a TI Dom tell me they don't like the traditional give people gifts on this certain day type of day, and like birthdays or like parties, like social get-togethers, because it's like, ooh, they're just gonna get together and chat about things that are not important.
Yeah, or like the idea of Christmas, the concept of gifts at Christmas used to be, they were for the poor. The rich would go down and feed the poor and give them clothes for the winter and whatnot. And then it converted into this capitalistic pile of garbage that we deal with today.
Ooh, hot damn. So how do you use your 8th function, Fi?
I guess it probably only comes out. It probably only comes out when it comes to. It's weird. It's sometimes it's hard for me to distinguish Fe and Fi because I do so little Fi that I really have to decide. Okay, this is something that is truly important to me, and then that's how I determine that it's Fi. But it takes a lot of work to determine, am I ready to plant my flag right here for this personal reason? A lot of the times those things, those types of actions feel selfish.
Mm-hmm.
So I avoid a lot of personalizing things in that way just because it feels kind of selfish.
Makes sense. Are you easily bored? Is that an SE thing?
Yes and no. See, that's why I guess that kind of might be what differentiates me easily from an ESTP. If I am bored, all I got to do is start thinking about philosophy or something. I can go into myself and get away from boredom pretty easily. But I do often find myself bored and then taking action to relieve that boredom. I do that.
Mm-hmm.
That happens a lot. Happens a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
makes sense. And so Michael the INTJ says, Jenzenials unite. I don't relate to the TI-FE axis, but I definitely relate to the 1978 to 1982 axis. That is hilarious, Michael. You're funny.
Yeah, I used to always say that we're the best. We're the best generation because we didn't give our kids participation trophies, but we didn't beat them either.
Ooh.
That's
What is your relationship with tradition?
I don't like it so much. I don't want to spin off too far, but I think it's concepts like tradition that get us in similar problems like our culture and society is in today. Tradition can make people not think about, the future, right? It's almost like you're caught in the past when you're thinking about tradition. And old ideas are usually crappy ideas. So I don't respect tradition very much unless you can prove that it works, right? It shouldn't be tradition just for tradition's sake. That's, to me, not acceptable.
Yeah,
We should
that
always be progressing.
that is a great thought. There's an element to TI where it notices where something is harmful. Like this logic is harmful, so this is how you should think more clearly. The FETI axis is about social truths. And so cool stuff. How INFP and INTP develop SE? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Urgency.
My best advice would be go out and jog. That's a really stressing the body is actually it's becoming. I can't cite articles obviously, but Dr. Rhonda Patrick is somebody you should look into. She's always talking about how stressing the body is actually good for us. Like there's now studies that say doing a sauna like 3 times a week is provable to extend life, longevity. Start jogging. It's really the easiest thing. And I'm going to tell you the first couple days, the first couple weeks, maybe even, it's going to hurt. Like really, you're going to be sore and you don't want to overdo it. Really nice and slow. On day 1, run to the end of the block and run back. Then give yourself a day off. On day 2, run 2 blocks and then back. I think when people have an idea about getting out and getting active, they just want to run out and do it. And then you end up hurting yourself or you're too sore the next day. Those things SE will really come through for you if you just give it a little time and don't dive right into it. The effort in the short term is worth the SE payoffs in the long term.
Yes. Thank you. That is really insightful. And so I'm an ISTP and I have trouble driving even though I have SE. Any tips on braking and turning better? You're the one-stop shop for people to SE better now.
Well, having trouble driving. So what I suspect is probably happening maybe is, are you getting lost in thought? Maybe, because that happens to me when I'm driving. the basic SE things like driving, it's so basic, right? We do it on autopilot, we do it on cruise control, right? And I often find myself just, it's so easy of a task that I don't even have to think about doing it, and I forget that I'm even doing it. Um, I don't know if everybody has that or not. Does that happen to everybody? I don't know. Slowing down helps, right? I once talked to somebody who was just driving so fast all the time, and they'd get tickets and they'd wreck, and it was just it was a mess. And I sat down and I showed on paper. I was like, okay, you're going point A to point B at 60 miles an hour, right? It's going to take you 1 hour to get there, whatever the formula was. Okay, now let's redo it, but you're doing 70. Now you're speeding. And I showed that you're really getting like 1 minute of time out of all that dodging and weaving out of traffic, because nobody's doing this for an hour straight. It's usually for your 20-minute drive to work. All of that craziness effort might save you like 1 minute. There is no rush when you're out there on the road, unless you're circumnavigating the globe, because those little tiny benefits that you think you're getting by passing that next car, it's an illusion. It's not truly a benefit. You're putting yourself at far more risk, and everybody else at far more risk, to save literally seconds to maybe a minute or two. So slowing down, for one, it's easier to turn when you're moving slower. It's easier to brake when you're moving slower. Just be less aggressive would be my advice. Just take it as it goes. Let driving be. Don't let the people around you either. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be in the fast lane going slow. Nobody wants that guy.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't also have to, just because the guy behind you is up your butt, that doesn't mean you have to speed up. F him. It's your life. It's your, you speed up. Now you're both putting everybody in danger. Just don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Stay within the laws of the land and take it easy. And you should.
Yeah, so lesson here, ESTPs on a whole are more impulsive than ISTPs, because ISTPs have lower down extroverted sensing. They're going to be more like look before you leap, like be more cautious before you jump into something, even when driving, as Brian put it. So yeah. Thank you, Carbon Tracy. I like being called the low-key version of Oprah. You get a compliment, and you get a compliment. In my love language, my top one is words of affirmation, so that was really nice to my heart. What popular fictional characters do you believe fit the ISTP personality type?
My favorite movie is Django Unchained. Django, I think, is an ISTP. John Wick, I know he's a popular ISTP. Some real life ISTPs, like Michael Jordan. He's borderline fictional character, with how great he was. But those are really the only few that come to mind. I don't get too involved in, like, I know that there's a whole genre of MBTI anime. I see this on, like, once in a while I'll go to Personality Database, and like when I did that, but that's how I found out. I confirmed that I suspected Django was an ISTP, and then I went to Personality Database, and sure, everybody else thinks he's an ISTP too. So, but that's about the extent of, like, I've never been somebody who typed people, or once in a while there's a I do it for fun, maybe if it's like a whole group, but I have zero desire to tell people who they are. So just the idea of typing a fictional doesn't even come to mind, to be honest with you.
That's a good and healthy way of approaching it. And so Tigerhead Dude says, Tim, the INTP, also says something along the lines of Brian, that the most out of character thing he did technically wouldn't be out of character, because if you're doing it, nothing is out of character because it's you doing it. And here's something I noticed with TI is that it's very logically consistent. I kind of say it like this. TI believes that if you are an orange, then you are an orange. Even if you peel off the outer layer, you're just an orange without the peel now, but you're still the orange. Whereas like with some FI users, sometimes they'll take on a completely new identity. So they'll feel like they're a completely new person and that they're nothing like the old version of themselves at all. And then the TI user is like, well, you're still an orange, but you're like a different type of orange now, but you're not like a completely different thing at your core. You understand that, right? And so that's where like TI and FI conflict come in, because TI is like, that's not logically correct. And then the FI is like, I'm no longer this person I was before.
I totally get it.
Cool. And so the next question is about TE, but just we did that earlier. So if you just scroll earlier, you'll see that. And so did you have, or if so, how did you deal with bad NI and adulting?
You have, so how do you deal with, how do I deal with bad NI while adulting? I see bad NI out in the world. I saw my own NI as bad when I realized that on occasion I have the desire to engulf myself into a conspiracy theory or something. But bad would be when everything is a conspiracy theory. And, it's kind of a reflective of, what's going on in the world right now. Is it's kind of like Force Slot and I run amok on all this conspiracy nonsense. That's the bad NI.
Interesting. Yeah. It seems lower down NI in the third or fourth slot, especially with STPs. They tend to really be into conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
So,
I would say I'm fully into them, but I do it for fun. Whereas it seems like Force Slot and I will just it becomes like their life or something.
yeah. Because for fourth slot NI for ESTPs, it's taking away their freedom. It's limiting them. So they start to take the conspiracy theories a little more seriously with some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And so this next question is about NE. We answered it earlier on, so we'll just let you know about that. And so, hi, Brian and Joyce. And so, do you struggle with repressed anger? If so, is there anything particularly helpful in regulating strong emotion?
Yeah, I used to. I'm not sure if this would be function related or not, but I think most boys can have anger management issues. We all want to punch a wall once in a while. How I deal with it is separating myself from the situation and taking deep breaths. Basically, being mindful in that moment that I'm angry, that because sometimes it can happen, you don't notice it. But being mindful to notice that it's happening, to stop, and just I take like literally like meditative breaths. I concentrate on my breath in through my nose and out through my mouth. And by only concentrating on just that breath alone, and the other thing is going to try and beat its way in there, but just keep concentrating. Only breath. You give it about 10 minutes or so, and you'll get back down there. You'll get back down to where you belong.
Absolutely. And so, thank you for the super chat. Thank you. And so, can you two compare and contrast TI NI loop in ISTPs versus NI TI loop of INFJ? So, yeah. Would you like to take it off?
To be perfectly frank, I don't have enough knowledge about looping to speak about it. I apologize.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So sometimes looping in an ISTP is not going out to SE. So it's an ISTP that actually like is a loner, but actually secludes themselves outside of the sensory world. So you'll see some of that TI and I loop. They're both going to intellectualize. So with NITI or TINI, you're going to see people who intellectualize. With an ISTP, you might see more of their inferior FE appearing in their loop. So they say things that are like offensive and don't realize it just because they're stating the truth, and it just accidentally ropes people the wrong way sometimes. So I guess that's another quality of being in the loop, because you're not integrating your extroverted functions.
Story of my life. I might be in a loop, Joyce.
Oh no. An ISTP who's in the loop too will stay at home all the time. So there'll be someone who's like a basement dweller who's kind of like just at home all the time because they're rejecting their SC too.
That just sounds like just general depression for an
It does.
ISTP. You know, maybe like looping is just straight up depressed for an ISTP.
It is, yeah. So they're both more serious. They're both more kind of sad. When the INFJ is looping, I feel like I'm never out of a loop. I feel like I live in a loop. So I think that comes from you're not fully feeling a situation. You feel like a distant galaxy almost. So it's almost like you're a detached galaxy. A bubble of an illusion instead of like people and mystery, instead of people actually getting to know you.
An enigma wrapped in a quandary, wrapped in an illusion, right? That's
Yeah.
the INFJ, yeah.
But with the ISTP, even if they're looping, they're still going to be more of a realist. So you see with Brian, he brings us back to reality, because ultimately, even though he's looping, his SE is still a little higher up. So he'll still go like, that's not realistic. That's not realistic. Whereas that's not necessarily an INFJ's. Like if an INFJ loops, they're not going to be like, that's not realistic, like an ISTP will be. Because the sensing function is last, ultimately.
That all checks out. That checks out.
Cool. And so in relationships, has anyone ever told you to be more human and you were just being yourself?
I wouldn't, probably not, because I wouldn't have engaged in that relationship in the first place without them having an understanding of who I am. You know, in fact, it's kind of like the mysteriousness of how I would be was kind of, I think it was kind of like one of my qualities almost. I don't know if it's truly, but it was like an alluring quality to be quiet and mysterious. So if that person had found me that way, but then turned around and said, you know, can you be more lively? It would be kind of weird. So I've never had that experience before. I mean, I've obviously had people tell me that I act like a robot and stuff, but not in like close relationships. I don't think that's ever happened before. Because that would be like that would come on pretty quick in the relationship. And it would, you know, you can't change people like that. Is what I would probably tell that person is, listen, hey, you know, I may be a lot of things, and I may be a little bit robot-y, but I also have a lot of good qualities too. And trying to change out of my robotiness, it almost feels like changing me as a person. And I do try and do that when I talk about being conscious of FE and always trying to put out that extra effort. It takes effort to be conscious of FE and do it. I guess that is me trying not to be such an ISTP robot.
That's a good point you raise. There are certain things about me that I think people try to change fundamentally that I feel like are really just who I am at my core. And it's the woo-woo stuff. I'm a very woo-woo person, intuitive first person. So like when people tell me to be more realistic or less woo-woo, there are some things I can change, but there are some things that if I were to change that would really, really not go well, because I don't know how to change that, because that's such a in everything I do, it's the lens in which covers everything.
Yep, so, for sure.
There's that quality with, we were talking about looping in the last question. I think maybe with an INFJ and an NITI loop, they're more likely to invent theories of their own. So maybe like in an unhealthy state, they're going to go in a woo-woo state, and they're going to like start like thinking about their theories of certain things, or proactively like kind of like create theoretical models, because when you buckle down on TI, you start to get into modeling, and if you have a higher up intuitive function, you're gonna also enjoy kind of like creating your own understanding of something. So that might add to it too. Does Brian ever take things too personally?
Do I take things? No, I mean, you can pretty much insult me with any derogatory, and it's going to slide right off. But if you insult somebody I like, the closer they are to me, the more I'll be offended.
Oh, you're a real one. How dramatic is it dating you? Are you a dramatic person, or marrying you? Are you like, do you ever incite, who's the first one to start like to incite conflict? Is it ever you?
Yeah, for sure. My wife's an ENTJ. So we have TI battles all the time. All the time. She'll be like, hey, do this thing. And I'll be like, whoa. We need to think this through first. And that's basically our relationship, is her going and me hanging on.
There's this really funny relationship between IPs and EJs. The IP is like, slow down, and the EJs like, speed up. And so you have this funny divide. Oh. Yeah. I have a lot of TI and FI Dom clients, and a theme that comes up is decision fatigue. It's like sometimes TI and FI like to think things through very thoroughly, or feel things through very thoroughly. And so sometimes it'll like to really take its time with making choices or kind of understanding something. Whereas like the EJs I coach are like the exact opposite. They're like, decision fatigue, what's that? You know?
Yeah.
It's really funny.
Exactly.
You and your ENTJs, hilarious. And so we're going to have time for one more question, and then we're going to end the panel. So how would you describe your interactions with TE users and TI users? Can you tell the difference?
Yeah, I can. I can tell the difference. You know, high up TE really isn't much different than TI. I mean, I guess where I can see the difference is when you're debating like productivity almost. You know, the TE will say, well, look, it's all getting done right now. But you know, TI might say, well, hold on, if we, you know, put a little, stop for a second, put a little extra time into it and do it this way, maybe we can get it done even faster than if we just keep on chugging along this way. And that's where I kind of see those two swaying back and forth. Like it happens with, we were just talking about my wife and I, and it's almost like a pendulum, but a pendulum that has two, right? It's almost like constantly doing this. The two of them are And then they slowly find a point for a while, but then one will swing back the other way. And then and it's almost like this dance that Ti and T are always doing when they're interacting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel about the TI interaction. It's a dance of who can be more right, I suppose.
Yeah. Rightness with action. So I guess TE doing the thing, or rightness of thinking. It's like, let me think this through entirely. Yeah. TE is more about logical heuristics, whereas TI is more about the logical equation behind things. So they still tackle like logic, but in different ways.
I'll be honest, TE is my hardest one to figure out. I don't know why. I don't know why it is, but anytime somebody asks me to talk about TE, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to talk about it. Maybe because I'm biased. It's probably because I have a bias. I see, my wife's T Dom, I'm TI Dom. I feel like she bulldozes me sometimes, and so I'm biased in that way. But those are good, right? It's a good type of interaction, right? This isn't like, boy, how can that marriage? No, this is actually what makes marriages stronger, is when you're not just always feeding each other bullcrap, right? We're challenging each other constantly. We're constantly learning from each other, and ultimately it works out great.
Absolutely. Beautiful way of putting it, Brian. And so thank you so much for coming out and repping the ISTP personality. We need more sensing types in the community because it gives a better calibration for everyone, because they're like, how do ISTPs actually look like? Because they're unheard of. They're like the unicorns, the mythical creatures, the birds of paradise, some sort of elusive creature. And so people are very intrigued because it's a learning experience, and it's a humbling experience because we finally get a good idea of what an ISTP actually looks like beyond our projection of what we think they look like. And so, yeah, you have a lot of fans of your beard. It's a majestic art piece.
Well, if on that topic, I have a challenge going on at my channel right now. Once I get to 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to shave my beard on live stream. So please subscribe to the Genxennial, and eventually my children haven't even seen me with a clean face in their entire life. You can make it happen.
You heard it from him. So, yeah, thanks. Thank you, everyone, for asking amazing questions in the live chat, too. And we'll see you all in the next episode.